Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Key Requirements for Your Next-Gen MES in 2022. Today, our agenda focuses on the importance of a Next-Gen MES solution in 2022, the 5 key requirements when evaluating a Next-Gen MES solution, and potential pitfalls to avoid. Lastly, we'll discuss how to successfully implement a new solution into your tech stack. Now, I'm excited to introduce our main speakers. Sebastian Laurendell, Solutions Engineer here at Tulip, has years of experience in MES solutions for discrete, process, and pharma industries, as well as an expertise in solution development, technical leadership, pre-sales engineering, and proof of concept. Patrick Harrigan, Strategic Alliances Leader here at Tulip, spent years identifying and delivering digital transformation solutions for Fortune 500 manufacturing customers. Take it away, Patrick and Sebastian.
Yeah, hi everyone. Sebastian, yeah, nice to meet you. Thank you for joining, and very excited to share about you, talk about MES, which I've been working on for the last 10 years, and yeah, exciting to show about next-gen MES can help you.
Yep, thanks, Sebastian. Pleasure to meet everyone. Thank you all for taking your lunch break to join us today. Hopefully it will be well worth your time, and at the very least, hopefully you'll learn something new that you might not know leaving this session today. So I think the way we're going to kick this off, Sebastian and I are going to go a little bit back and forth and make it a little bit more conversational or conversive. Every customer we engage with typically is at a different level of their digital maturity. And I think it's important to see, not only for us, but for everyone on this call, that everyone comes at digital transformation with a little bit different perspective. And quite often that perspective is based on our current reality today. I think to level set the conversation today, it's important to really establish some firm definitions as to what we talk about or what we consider to be a next-gen MES system. In order to do that, I think we need to level set or lay a foundation of what a traditional MES system is. And that's a very tough question, or a very tough acronym to define, quite frankly. Sebastian and I have been in the space for more than a decade each, and we've seen that definition grow over time. And it continues to grow and evolve as we push forward. But traditionally, in context of how MES systems have been utilized, it's used to fill a gap between our ERP and our frontline operations when we're actually performing tasks and recording information on the shop floor. That usually involves a core set of functionality. I've heard it often referred to as the core 4, but in short, it's managing, how do we manage resources? How do we schedule our production or our routing operations? How do we coordinate the execution of our work or our operations on the shop floor? How do we track that? How do we manage inventory associated to the work we're doing? So it's the core functionality, again, associated to a traditional MES system. Now, as we move forward into what we call next-gen MES, and I'll explain to a moment as to why that's important and why we're seeing more and more of the industry push towards that terminology. We talk often about what we call a digital operations platform, right? And if we were to take one level up above a traditional MES system, that's where we traditionally mention the term digital operations or frontline operations platform. These platforms or next-gen MESs contain MES functionality from traditional or historic MES systems, but it also presents a whole new set of functionality that traditionally wasn't available in these traditional MESs, or augments and extends that functionality and allows you to get more bang for your buck, or helps to drive cost of ownership, which we will talk here in a moment as well. All right, so why are we even talking about next-gen MES, and why is this a topic of a webinar, right? The manufacturing industry has changed quite significantly, especially over the past couple of years, and will continue to change rapidly moving forward. And the way I talk about this is often breaking it down into 3 buckets, right? How operationally has the industry changed? How technically has the industry changed or will continue to change? And then most importantly, but one that's quite often overlooked, is the social dynamics that are affecting the manufacturing industry. So from an operational standpoint, why do we need to look at adopting new technology such as Next-Gen MES? Quite frankly, I'm not going to tell you anything new here around labor shortage and retiring workforces, having to do more with less. All of these challenges equate to a more modern approach and flexibility of our systems to help get people trained and up to speed much easier and much faster. And again, that's one of the key pillars we'll touch on here. From a technical perspective, what's changing? We have things like blurred tech stacks. Historically, these siloed sets of data are no longer going to be feasible within our next-gen manufacturing operations. We have to have a technology that's able to transact data across multiple systems, across machines, be able to collect human interaction, and merge all of that together in one cohesive ecosystem, right? And then last but not least, socially, we are asking a workforce to come into our environment and perform tasks on legacy, very outdated technology and equipment. And if any of you have ever transferred from or gotten a new job, for example, and you're used to using a piece of equipment or software at your old job, and you come to a new job and you say, gosh, I wish I still had the old way we used to do things, because this new way, a little bit harder, and I know what's best practice, what other types of solutions are out there that can allow us to be more productive. It's this consumer mindset, right? Everyone has a phone and a tablet. You tap on it twice on your screen, and you can receive data from anywhere in the world. The same idea applies to our business applications now. We can't expect people to come in and not expect that type of user experience in order to drive adoption and things like that. So for all these reasons are why we're here today to talk about Next-Gen MES. Industry's changing, our priorities are changing, our challenges are changing, and certainly the expectations of our employees and our new incoming workforce are changing.
Thank you, Patrick. So I see the poll results are in, so from what I see, and like you might have a slightly more dated response, Patrick, but I see that like if we have a 50-50 around like I don't have an MES and I have an MES and I'm not happy with it. But we still do have like some people who are happy with the MES, so that's good to see, right? I don't know if you have more comments about this. I'll talk about like kind of relating these responses to this topic here about talking about MES common challenges and how a next-gen MES next-gen MES can respond to this. But Patrick, if you have like some comments on the poll yourself, like feel free to share.
No, I find that very interesting. I think what you're getting ready to cover here plays exactly into the concept of this 50-50 split.
Yeah.
People are all over the board on their digital maturity right now.
Yeah. And I want to start with, because like we said, like we've been in that space for like several years, and we joined Tulip recently, right? We joined like this next-gen movement recently, and we do believe in MES functionalities, MES solutions. We know that there's a place for them, and we're glad to see that some people have gone through this transition with MES and got some success out of it, right? So it's good to see that in the poll it reflects this as well. But everybody knows, and the poll also reflects this, that those like MES projects, they come with challenges, right? And some of those are listed here, and those are like challenges that a next-gen MES like might be able to respond to. So you might want to look into this like new approach to MES. So like the first one, which is like a big one, is your frontline workers like often struggle with the MES. One reason being the one that Patrick just shared, like difficulty of adapting to a solution, but also those solutions, those traditional solutions, are often like dedicated at collecting data and just showing data in one standard way. But then like the operator is kind of left alone and trying to figure out how the application works. They are like not always like very modern and not really human focused, right? And today there's so many technologies that allow you to really like bring data to the operator, like to kind of augment them, as we like to talk about, bring them the right data at the right time, and constantly improving the quality of the applications, right, of the interface that the operator uses. So kind of like bolstering the worker autonomy by bringing them more information. Right? Also focusing on agility, right? So traditional solutions have complex structures that often prevent them to respond to external changes, right? So it's really difficult to make your MES evolve, right? And so those next-gen solutions like should allow, or you want to look at a solution, and maybe some traditional MES actually will help you there, but it's worth like looking and trying to find a solution that will help you shift and scale as you grow fast and maybe face new challenges or opportunities, right? Like we've seen some recently, and we've noticed everybody has learned that they need to be agile, be able to pivot, right? Another common challenge is the fact that those solutions are heavy, right? And they are like heavy in infrastructure, in service, and so the IT, like you can get into some kind of bottleneck very fast with your IT team, like not being able to support sometimes, like stranded with resources or like vendors, right? Difficult to reach, taking time to like extend, right? Like and extend processes, solutions, and so. This is where citizen development, which you might have heard of, is a more and more common topic being discussed with like the no-code, low-code platforms. And that's one solution to empower your engineers to solve some of those like problems, like augment the solutions. Maybe like also having more business knowledge, being able to respond faster than for example having to wait on your IT team. Making sure that the data that you're capturing can be contextualized, right? So making sure that your solution will allow you to use the data, right? Like once you're collecting the data, doing something with it. That's what happens a lot. Like those solutions again collect a lot of data, but often it's kind of hidden away and very difficult to reach, or difficult to maybe trigger alerts or like warnings, like get insights from it. So how to gain that kind of holistic view and real-time holistic view of what's happening across the shop floor, across the organization, and get insight and actionable insights from it. Then in terms of implementation, we'll talk about this more as well, like making sure that you can get ROI fast. We know that MES projects can be very long, very complex, very risky. So that's kind of agility and also like speed of like value return and innovation, right? There's so many more technologies available around us, right? Like Ray talks about IoT, cloud, and so many more, like machine learning. How easy can the solution you have today really extend and support those technologies? Once again, like MES, like traditional MES are very heavy and they're working at being integrating, but it's usually very complex. So you want to look at a solution that can support fast integration and supporting newer technologies like no code, for example, or no code can be an enablement of supporting those kind of new technologies as well. So those are some of the example of challenges that you might be facing if you have an MES, or you might end up facing if you go with a traditional MES route, and it's worth thinking about beforehand, right? And so ways that the more modern solutions, the next-gen solutions, will be able to fill those gaps, help fit those challenges. Some of them are listed here, so you might want to look into those different capabilities we have listed here. And I just go through some of them that maybe are closer to me, but user experience, for example, that we'll talk about in a minute, is very important, right? You want your new solution to make it easy to simplify guidance for the operators. So bring the right data at the right time from maybe different sources, right? So focusing on that user experience and getting kind of buy-in from the operator is very important. You want that solution to be scalable as well, right? You know where you start, but you don't know where you're going, right? You might be start small, medium, or big already, but you want to be able to evolve and scale your solution across multiple lines, multiple plants, fast and easily. Faster time to value, as I talked about, right? Through no-code solutions can help, or cloud-based solutions can help with this. Being able to quickly go from an idea to an actual solution, right? So that comes from a lot of different tools that this platform will allow you to quickly build, test, and deploy. And then citizen development, that kind of goes together with that faster time to value, right? Delegating or involving your engineers, your even maybe your operators in the process of building those applications with fast feedback, having the business users really building those functionalities applications with the support of the IT team, right? But having the business people who have the knowledge really involved and supporting your project.
So we've been talking sort of high level so far, conceptual. Let's drill down and get more tactical, right? So when looking at an MES system or a next-gen MES system, or filling some gaps with an existing MES system, we want to cover sort of the 5 best practices or key areas that you need to focus on. First and foremost, user acceptance and experience. Secondly, solution implementation and flexibility. After that, data accessibility and connectivity, citizen development, as it compares to IT reliance and quite often limited resources that are available in today's environment. And then last but not least, how do we sort of apply all of that to the total cost of ownership for implementing not only a net new MES system, but any system for that matter. So Sebastian, if you don't mind, let's just go ahead and hop into number 1 and I'll kick us off here. So user acceptance and experience, it's one thing that I'm extremely passionate about when talking about any sort of digital transformation initiatives. All of our efforts are for naught if we are unable to get the adoption and acceptance on the shop floor that we have planned. Meaning, we can sit in the back office and plan for weeks and months and years, come up with the greatest system, the greatest implementation plan in the world. If we roll it out and our end users say, it doesn't help us with our job, or it adds all these problems, it will all be for naught. And quite frankly, if any of you on this call have ever implemented any sort of large-scale implementation or enterprise system, it's with 100% certainty that you will get feedback from the field and pushback as to how the original implementation was done and what needs to be changed and modified. And so it's of the utmost importance that we follow a few principal rules when looking for user adoption, right? We always need to involve our end users and make them feel as if they have a voice in the planning and execution of a new implementation of a next-gen MES system. We've mentioned this earlier. We need to replicate the same type of consumer-facing user experience that we're all used to in our personal lives, that on our Macs or on my iPhone right here. It's this simplicity. Think about when the first time you started your first job and you were accessing the first system of record. For me, it was actually a green screen in a grocery store. But long story short, imagine stepping into a new environment, which we ask new operators and folks on our shop floor to do on a daily basis, and saying, hey, look, we need you to function and produce and assemble day one with very limited training because we're limited on resources and don't have time. You have to simplify that end user experience in order to get that user adoption and get them up to speed as fast as possible. So questions to consider on that: how easy will users accept and adopt the system? That has to be the primary focus. Always, 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 if there's one thing you take away from this whole conversation today, that has to be at the forefront of any sort of enterprise implementation, in particular an MES implementation. Can you reliably collect data from the shop floor? So it's one thing to access data from multiple siloed systems. People talk about this often. It's a unified experience for the user. One of the things that are often overlooked is how do we simplify the data collection mechanisms for folks on our shop floor so that we can tie back data, quality data, not bad data, actual information that will drive our decision making, and do it in a very simplistic format. So whether that's integrating to sensors, whether that's integrating to Bluetooth tools that automatically record the efforts that we're performing and make that part of our workflows and interactions. So without harping on this too much, that's the primary area that we need to focus when looking at Next-Gen MES. How do we get the end users involved and make them feel like they have a voice in what you're implementing on your shop floor? Because ultimately that is the primary driver for every digital transformation solution and killer of every digital transformation solution if you don't get that end user acceptance. Some pitfalls to avoid. Obviously, disparate systems are a major challenge. Bad data in equals bad data out, as I just mentioned a moment ago. Paper-based processes, how do we quickly digitize those in a way that makes our end users' lives easier? So not just putting a piece of paper behind glass, as we quite often say. How do we enhance the user experience by auto-populating data, by enabling them to take photos right then and there, by scanning barcodes and QR codes, leveraging all of this modern technology that people expect in their consumer device, but again, we historically haven't had on the shop floor.
So let's talk now about solution implementation, and so how to actually meet everybody's expectation, right? So to provide your users with the best experience possible, as Patrick just shared, right, which is very important. It's also important to think about how to start that project, right? And starting with good foundation on the solution implementation side. So the first thing is, right, you want to keep that risk low, right? You want the operators to be happy, but you also want your risk to be low, right? So how can you work about this? What are the questions to consider there? So first off, how long should you wait for your MES to deliver value? It's something that we're pretty serious about. We believe that you shouldn't wait for months or year or year to really start having a solution deployed on the shop floor, right? So that's how much it can take for MES, right? And from start to go live. It would be great probably, right, to instead have some basic functionalities already able to be deployed, and some core functionalities that can be quickly deployed to the shop floor, can actually be tested quickly and deployed, to really reap benefits in weeks or months instead of months to years, right? And then how your product will process and product will probably evolve too. So how will your solution, the solution that you've decided, or how does the solution that you have today evolve with your process, right? We know that there's a lot of things that might be outside of your control as well that will force you to change, right? And so how can you react to changes that are forced upon you? How will you be able to accommodate every need and every change over time, right? So those traditional MES solutions are great at standardizing process. That's one of their strengths, right? Everybody has kind of the same solution, and it comes with built-in solutions. But does everybody need the exact same functionalities? If we talk, for example, about user acceptance and user experience, how can we increase that experience by maybe tailoring the applications and the process and the solutions to your process, instead of often having to tailor your process to the solution itself, right? There's obviously a balance there between standardization and tailoring and just and customizing, let's say, but that's one to find. And so the traditional way might not be the best way for everybody. I believe probably for most is not the best way. And then obviously, where do you want to start, right? So that's pretty important, but in terms of functionalities, but also in terms of plans or areas, for example. So which plan should you start with? That's a question that's often come from customers, and often the idea is maybe to start with the plan that actually has the most difficulties because it needs an MES to improve. While that might be an interesting thing, but that means in the meantime, other plans that also could rip off the benefits of an MES are waiting, and it might be delayed by a year or 2 years. That and that kind of plan that has issues already might not be the place to actually put a complex solution, right? Because that might create more complexity, more difficulties. And then also, which functionalities do you want to start with, right? Which are the core functionalities you should start as you're embarking into that MES journey. So what are the pitfalls and the ways to avoid them? For us, what do we see? So we think one of the first pitfalls is that all or nothing approach to building a new MES or replacing an existing MES, right? So there are alternatives, which is starting with core functionalities, core MES apps, right? Avoiding the idea that everybody gets the same MES, we think that's risky as well. To get people buying, you might want to be able to tailor and to easily be able to customize, right? That's often a word that people don't like to talk about, customizing, but you want to be able to really tailor the process to your the solution to your process. And so defining core apps is a way to avoid this filling the cracks. We call it like that, fill the cracks approach, which is also a way to, you don't necessarily have to replace an existing MES. If you have one, you can focus on maybe like fixing or work, adding to that MES by putting a new next-gen solution, right? To focus on maybe some of the gaps that the MES left, and that might be difficult to tackle with an MES. So there's different ways of going, right? Like starting with a brand new solution, replacing a solution, or just like adding to that solution with a new next-gen MES solution. But the idea still is always starting with the use cases that finding use cases that you want to deploy, right? And so which one should those be? Probably like core use cases that could be deployed across the line, so everybody can start getting benefits fast and early. So that's like what we think like will make like your solution, your MES product more successful, right? Like focusing on making it available faster and focusing on agility and flexibility. Now, next topic in line is data accessibility and connectivity. So how to get the right data and make like good use of it, basically, right? So how to democratize data, kind of. So you want a solution that's going to be flexible, that will make your data accessible to everybody in the organization, and also contextualize the data, right? So like bring value to that data. Over the years, many people have seen like MES implementation that tend to focus on the E in MES, right? The execution part. That's what MES are good at, focusing on tracking execution. Collecting data, but really like the idea of like using that data kind of come at the end of the project, right? So I've seen it many times where customers end up with some reports that don't necessarily, not necessarily useful, or like can help a little bit, but then as they want to extend, they're really struggling to maybe create more reports to understand how the data is structured and so on. So questions to think of, like to try to avoid this, is first, like start thinking with actually like, okay, what information do you need, right, to get a holistic view of the operations? Like what data is important to you? What kind of KPIs like does your business run on? And kind of beginning with the end in mind, right? That's always good to start there. Can I add new data sources, whether from sensors, from machines, from cameras, or from like other business solutions, right? So how easy is it going to be to integrate with all of those? And like a big thing is integrating to like some of those other softwares, right? You have like ERPs around probably. For sure, like you must have an ERP. You might have some quality solutions that are already there. You might have already an MES that's running on certain plants or on all of your plants. Some homegrown solutions, like test solutions that have been like built at home, like by your organization. And so a lot of those like existing solutions might require like middleware, like with traditional MES. Like try to think about like ways to, or look at a solution that will allow you to easily interface those different data sources, right? Whether they are software or hardware. And then how is it to take action, like real-time action from the data you're collecting, right? So are you able to take that action in real time? Once again, like, so the data is there, but can you really take advantage of it, turn it into information, right? How is it to be like alerts, notifications, for example? So the potential pitfalls and ways to avoid that we see. So the first pitfall is like not being able to get that holistic view, right? Having all that data and not be able to use it, or missing data, or having data that are kind of siloed between teams or solutions, right? So how do you kind of focusing on trying to bring all that data into, make it available to everybody into one common area, one common tool, and trying to avoid to have like data that's not structured in a way that's easy to use, right? So from the beginning, focusing on making that data viable to everybody. And ways to avoid this is to start by thinking about like what do you want to measure and to visualize, right? So like once again, like what does your business need like to really understand what's going on the shop floor? What kind of information does it need? Avoiding the rigid data structures that are difficult to work with. And then focusing on value creation, right? Converting that data that's being collected into information for decision making, right? So that's like obviously, once again, like data is great, but if you have like there's like all over, like that's a big issue today with big data. There's a lot of data, but it's very difficult to make use of it. And so let's start to focus from this at the beginning of the project, right, and not struggle with it later. And then the last topic I'll talk about, and then I'll give the ball back to Patrick, is IT reliance and citizen development, right? So how citizen development can actually support your IT organization in a way. Because we want to avoid like IT and vendor bottlenecks, which a lot of organizations face today, right? Every part of the business today is very IT reliant, right? And manufacturing as much as any other. And your IT team is dealing with like more and more complexity, right? So like so much demand coming from every place in every organization, with more software being needed, for example, and not necessarily the resource to tackle all these demands. And those MES projects, like traditional projects, can be very heavy endeavors, right, for an IT team. Think about the infrastructure that might be needed if you want to go on premise, for example. Like all the servers to install, the software to install, that's very time consuming. In terms of software development to customize or extend the said MES, or build middleware, as we just discussed, right? How much like time are they going to be involved maintaining the infrastructure as well? Like a usually very complex infrastructure, complex software as well. And then also maybe like being kind of a first line of tech support. So there's a lot here that your IT might have to support. And depending on the organization you work in, your IT, I don't know, you might be IT or you might be ops, right? But there might be more or less integration between the two teams. Like some IT teams like understand like the process on the shop floor very well, and they're able to really support. Some IT teams are a bit more removed because they probably have other things to focus on, right? So they cannot be as dedicated. So like, how can we avoid making IT this bottleneck and help them and try to remove the pressure? So some of the questions to consider, like the first one that we think is very important is how much should you rely on IT to support the manufacturing operation, right? So how can we like maybe just like take some pressure away from them and just like have them focus on other solutions? There's many ways of doing this. Like cloud is a great way of taking some responsibilities away. Like citizen developer, citizen builder, building like more business savvy people, giving them responsibilities on the solutions. What is the ratios, the ratio of software to services to like the solution that you might be deciding to select, right? MES has been historically service heavy. I mean, this is maybe not something you will notice initially, but this should come pretty fast as you're trying to change, or maybe just starting from like the first quotes. You will see that, I mean, there's usually like you need your IT to be involved, or a system integrator or vendor itself, even for something like very simple sometimes as like requesting a new process, like a new route to be added to be configured for some materials, for example. Sometimes the IT is in charge of this, and the operations team might be waiting for like weeks or months to have like a new route, a new process to be supported. So like you might want to try to find like make sure you can avoid this, right? And try to anticipate changes, right? Like how will your MES grow? Start planning and thinking of like those future service costs. Are you expecting new products, new lines, new plans? Like those will have an implication on your operational execution, and so that'd be thought of at the beginning as you plan and then select your next MES vendor. So the potential pitfalls to avoid, right? So first, the IT becoming a bottleneck, right? I think I stressed that a little bit at the beginning, and the way to avoid this is probably like trying to look at the platform that you're using, like good combination of technology and platform. And we're pretty big advocates here of cloud and no code. We think that there are great ways to, once again, to spare some resources from the IT team, right? I'm sure like they'll be able to help you in so many other ways if we can take some of that pressure off. The change requests, right? Like, so those change requests, like we said, over time may become time consuming, right? And so once again, citizen development, right, and time and good governance can allow to like maybe alleviate some of this. So if your operations team is more involved in supporting the product from the get-go, they'll be able to to deliver changes, right? Instead of relying on IT again. So making your team self-sufficient, and kind of bridging the disconnect between IT and OT that your organization might deal with. And then the last one, last pitfall, is those rigid MES that might end up having to be replaced as frustration grows, right? So you don't want to get there. You don't want to end up in 5 years saying, okay, that MES is not working, or maybe even faster than that, saying it's not working, we need to change it because we cannot support it anymore. So one way to go about this, from the beginning, challenge your MES vendor, right? Asking how can you handle future change use cases? How much time is it going to take, right? How difficult is it going to be, or how easy is it going to be? But start planning for this, because this is going to be expensive if you don't think about this early. So that's it about how we read citizen development and how can help your IT team and Reliance.
So Sebastian mentioned many great topics over his past 5 minutes there that directly tie to one, the usability of a system, and most importantly, how much the cost of ownership is, right? So not only how much is it for us to procure the system and get it implemented and set up and go live the first time, but how much is it and how much strain on our organization is it to maintain the system over time? And that quite often is the most expensive piece, especially when talking about making modifications or adjustments to fit unknown needs, right? The needs you have today and the requirements you have for your MES system today likely will not be the exact needs you have 12 months from now, and certainly not 24 months from now. So let's touch on that just a little bit. From an upfront cost perspective, when you, again, compare sort of a traditional MES implementation to a next-gen MES, traditional MES quite often is heavily reliant on a vendor-offered or third-party offered implementation resources, which, again, if anyone's been a part of large go-lives before, can be very costly, not only from an hourly wage standpoint, but it's a strain on the organization from a time perspective. So if you're part of a group evaluating or responsible for implementing a new system, and it goes on for 12 or 18 months, how much time and effort are lost from your team, not just implementation team, from your side as the buyer in participating in such an implementation, right? Now, the other major difference between a traditional MES and sort of this next gen is you get what you get with a traditional MES. It does 4, 5, 6 things. It does them well. But if for whatever reason your environment changes or your requirements change or your needs change, it becomes extremely difficult to implement those changes within these monolithic legacy MES systems. So on the inverse side, utilizing something like a next-gen MES system and taking a platform approach that enables you to not only get the 3, 4, 5 components you need from an MES, a traditional MES system today, but it also puts an underlying foundation in place which enables you to fill the gaps moving forward with one system, one investment, one platform, right? And then the last point I'll mention here, and Sebastian did a great job covering it, it's the idea of citizen development. Rather than having to rely on expensive, hard to find IT resources, implementing a platform that's no code democratizes the ability to build and modify workflows and applications on the shop floor is key for digital transformation moving forward. You cannot continue to operate by going through these bottlenecks that exist within enterprise and large organizations. You need to have local resources at the plant level that can be able to solve problems autonomously. And next-gen MES systems really help to solve that. So Sebastian, I'm going to skip ahead just for the sake of time here. I think we covered a lot on total cost of ownership. Long story short, over time, not only in the short term from a upfront investment perspective is next-gen MES much more cost effective, but certainly over a long period of time, far more cost effective. All right. So we've talked about how do we identify sort of the next gen MES system or some requirements that we would like or anticipate to have in a next gen MES system. Let's say we found one, right? Let's say we picked the perfect MES system for our organization. Let's shift quickly over to the implementation perspective. Okay, we found it. We're engaged with the vendor. Quite frankly, the normal software procurement process is spending a tremendous amount of time upfront vetting out the MES vendors in the market. And the reason being is once you make that decision, you've basically signed your life away, for lack of better words, and you're stuck with that. So you are putting your name, your reputation on implementing these big, robust systems, traditional MES I'm talking about. And if it goes wrong or goes sideways, it doesn't look great on you. So rather, we take a more contrarian approach. We want to get implementations done quick, easy, fast, quick time to value, so that we can all share quick wins, not only on the vendor side, but on the customer side as well. And you can experience quick successes when implementing new software. And we quite often do this through what we call pilots or proof of value. Quite often the industry or software vendors will say, we do some pilots, but we don't really want to. I think we're a little bit unique in the market at Tulip, where we heavily encourage pilots. You might have heard the term pilot purgatory in the past, and most software vendors will tend to shy away from that. But for a few reasons, which I'll mention here in a moment, we heavily drive customers towards that model. So the top part of the screen is more of a traditional implementation of MES. You do this very long evaluation process. It's a very long implementation and process design process. And then 18 months in, hopefully you'll roll out your first site and go live and start to experience some value. The bottom approach is what we consider the next-gen MES approach, where it's small, tactical, tangible pieces of a much more robust MES system that are implemented, rolled out. We collect user feedback in real time, apply that feedback, iterate on the solution, and then put a solution out that we know will get the user acceptance we need, rather than waiting 18 months to hope we do. And I want to point out the reason why we are so heavily passionate about trying this pilot approach, or proof of value approach. We have an 80% pilot conversion rate to production. So unlike a lot of other industry standards you might see around how many pilots convert into become production deployments, Tulip is extremely successful, and Next-Gen MES are extremely successful in letting our customers try it and solve problems tactically, and then actually roll that out into production and continue to use the Next-Gen MES platform as a foundation to build a solution for problem 3, 4, 5, 25, 35, 50 in the future, again, on one underlying technology integrated to existing enterprise systems. So with that, to quickly bring this full circle again, user acceptance and adoption is key. That model I just mentioned a moment ago, you need to try something quick. You need to roll it out. You need to collect that end user feedback, apply that feedback into the application, and then roll it out again. Quite often, because of the traditional software deployment model and how robust and expensive it is, most companies overlook or avoid that type of iterative development and end up having these large projects fail 12 months, 16 months, 18 months into the cycle. So we want to fail. If we fail, we want to fail quick, or we want to be able to use that as a learning experience to gather more information, to figure out how to make iterations and provide that top-notch end user experience so that we get user adoption.
All right, thanks, Patrick. So I guess I'll take it from here and take us quickly through two success stories. And I'll go quickly. There's plenty of information about those on our website as well. So if you want more details, feel free to go there and have videos as well. The first one is a medical technology company who needed to just like scale from small production to like hundreds of units per month. And so being like a medical company, there was obviously regulations, regulatory compliance to follow. so that usually it's translated into paper, but they want to avoid paper, right? And so get that EDHR or EDHR solution. And you can see here, like the solution was to implement Next-Gen MES here to help guide the operator workflow. And you can see here a picture on the right with of one of the operator screen with like some textual information, some pictures and so on, and some action buttons, right? So like, for them to quickly interact and exchange information with the rest of the team. But I was also allowing them to track production and document like the process, right? So with an electronic batch record or electronic digital history record, which you can see on the bottom right, allowing them to quickly like respond to audits, for example, or capture data and analyze data. So in the end, like the customer ended up, or we and the customer ended up building like 90 plus apps. They went like 100% like paperless, so which was like a big gain for them. And all of this in like 3 times, and like that from their own expectations, like 3 times faster than what they actually expected with the traditional MES. So this shows like the speed of a traditional MES, but also it shows like, I mean, some of those customers using those next-gen MES like are actually working like in a regulatory field, right? They have to deal with like FDA regulations, which are like pretty stringent, like in terms of quality, in terms of efficiency, and so on. And so those solutions are mature enough to support this kind of use case. I think it's good to know this as well. The next example is from PFF, like Piaggio Fast Forward, an automotive company, let's say. So they, in their case, they went from they started with a green field, right? So, and launching a new product. And so what they're looking to do is to like be able to like build this first production line and support like evolving product and a complex assembly of products that keep moving as their product was being refined and being tested down the line and like going through changes, right? So they had to be able to like support some kind of like an agile implementation and an agile product. And collecting data as well for like baseline that they can be used during for testing and for like their next production line, for example. So what the customer gained there is like a fully trained frontline workforce, as we say. So using those work instructions on the line, on the assembly line, was a way to like enforce quality, but also train those new operators that were just like building a new product, right? So there was some training to be done that the application was able to help with. 100% agile implementation, and now the customer can leverage like the learning from that first. I mean, for us, it's the size of a pilot, like a simple line, into like extending to the next line, right, and adding more functionalities and kind of following that increase and agile like step-by-step path that Patrick just shared with you for the implementation.
So we've covered a lot today. Certainly the focus of this, or what are the key things that you need to be looking at when evaluating Next-Gen MES. Tulip is actually absolutely one of the leaders in the Next-Gen MES space, sort of helping and working to redefine that space and build it from the ground up. It is a frontline operations platform, as we've mentioned a few times over, that really helps bridge the gap and close the communication loop with our frontline operators, assemblers, and technicians. So we are more than happy to share some additional information and at further times around Tulip, and certainly hope that we drove the point home that all of the requirements you're looking for in a next-gen MES system can certainly be satisfied by Tulip and our team here. So with that, maybe we hop into some questions here.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick and Sebastian. So the first question we have here that has a couple of upvotes as well is, does the pilot implementation strategy work to replace our current MES? We don't want to lose productivity.
So yeah, we're not talking about, we don't want to do a rip and replace kind of project. This is very dangerous in terms of losing that productivity you're talking about. The pilot can be a good place to start here as well. You might have a line that's not being used today where you can just start that pilot, or just start like replacing like place by place the existing MES, right? So we don't want to just like replace it all at once. We want to kind of once again like start with like small pilot functionalities testing, because this way you can quickly figure out whether Tulip is good for you or not, and then move and add functionalities and slowly replace and maybe just also not always just substitute, but also like fill the gaps where the existing MES is maybe lacking a little bit.
I think one important point here is Tulip's often leveraged to augment existing systems of record. So it is a great gap filler. So your MES that's in place right now may do a great job with solving problems 1 through 5, but problems 6 through 10, it doesn't do a great job with. And so it's not necessarily you have to choose one or the other. Quite often Tulip sits on top of existing MES systems and help augment functionality.
Great, thank you. And the next question here is, how can Tulip integrate with third-party equipment such as SMT or AOI machines?
So I'm not sure about what AOI machines, but so to talk about integration with machines, so there's several ways with Tulip to integrate with machines. So we do have like built-in machine monitoring capabilities to integrate with those, and on the connectivity side, we do support OPC UA out of the box, right, which is a pretty common standard protocol for machine and devices, for machines, on the shop floor. But we know not every machine might support OPC UA, or some machines might be too old to support OPC UA. And so that's why we also support, like we offer some edge devices that will allow you to interface with those machines. So I'm not sure, you might be talking about some specific protocols here that our edge device can interface with, like through another, some other low code capabilities. So retrieving data, capturing data on the edge, like maybe even massaging it and then sending to Tulip. And so if you have more questions, like we can show like go more in details about this. And there's also information about the connectivity on the platform itself if you go to tulip.co.
And the next question here is, how does Tulip interface with ERP systems, work order download, etc.? So
that's where, like we talked about, like I was talking about integration with third-party solutions and traditional MES relying on middleware often. And that's one thing that I discovered with Tulip when I joined, is that how much easier it is with Tulip. First, let's remember we're talking about the no-code platform, right? So we have a no-code way of interfacing with third-party solutions like ERPs. And we've worked with a lot of ERPs, like the major ones, but also like, there's so many ERPs in the industry so we've worked with like tens of them, maybe hundreds at this point, I'm not sure. But and so we have like that easy no-code way of building interfaces through usually writing or reading data straight from the database or using like web commands. And one just last thing to add about this, because we know that ERPs are not all cloud. So Tulip is cloud, but we can easily interface with your infrastructure on-prem as well, right? So some easy connectivity, so both for machines and for third-party solutions like ERPs.
Yeah, if you go to our website, there's a list of connectors, but all the major ERP systems, SAP, Oracle, Dynamics, NetSuite, you name it, we probably have some sort of connector too. Now, I will preface that depending on how unique the deployment is in an exact customer environment, there might need to be some connector configuration done, but very lightweight work compared to other mechanisms.
Great, thank you. We have our final question. Are there any existing objects on Tulip's platform that map to ERP objects, master and transactional data? And the secondary question is, are there out-of-the-box interface to replicate and exchange such data?
All right, so I'll focus on the first one, and then maybe you can bring the second part again. But maybe just to not forget the topic of the question, like asking about entity mapping. So Tulip is a no-code platform, so you'll be able to build your applications. And so if I take some of the examples that Patrick shared, for example, like we have those out-of-the-box connectors, for example, that will allow you to retrieve data. But then like we will help you, or you'll be able to take that data and build your own entities, right? So Tulip doesn't come with a set of entities, or it can like from the library, but it lets you the choice of organizing that data. So the answer is that you will be able like to map the data and map the entities from that you retrieve from the ERP. But we do have like customers using it to retrieve master data, like your bill of material, your routing and everything from a third party, from an ERP, and downloading it into Tulip.
Great. And one other thing to note about the out-of-the-box piece is we have Tulip has a library of configurable apps and app suites and connectors that can really get your digital transformation journey, kickstarted. So one more thing to note there is our Tulip library. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I really appreciate your time, Sebastian and Patrick, and we hope to see you at our next event.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Again, thanks, Patrick. Thanks, everyone.